The passage that we're going to look today is Ruth chapter 1, verses 6 to 18. Ruth chapter 1, verses 6 to 18. Ruth chapter 1, verses 6 to 18. I'll read the passage. Then Naomi arose with her two daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night, and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter for me, for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And Naomi said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. Amen. The title of today's sermon is Love is a Choice. Love is a Choice. It's very cliche. I told you last time that the central theme of Ruth is love. And today's passage shows us what true love is. And it shows us that love is essentially a choice. It's choosing that person over yourself. So let's look at the passage together. Last time ended with Naomi losing her husband and then her two sons. All she had left were her two daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. So only widows remained in this family. And I told you that becoming a widow without a grown-up son or any other recourse meant that you were finished. Your life was finished and there was no hope at all for you. Your survival, your basic survival was on the line. So this family was experiencing a deep tragedy and a desperate threat to their survival. And today's passage begins with Naomi hearing that... Huh? It's a phone? Oh, thank you. Where was I? Naomi hearing that the famine in Israel was over. So she decided to return home. It was a very reasonable decision. I mean, it's better to be closer to your friends and family and fellow countrymen when you're dirt poor and have nothing. But I don't think it was easy for Naomi to return, especially because of the gossip that was for sure going to be going on. But she didn't really have any other choice but to return. And Ruth and Orpah followed her as well. Just imagine these three women walking on a road to Judah. I don't see them laughing and having a good time. I see them totally silent, with the trauma of losing their loved ones still very fresh and stabbing their hearts. And Naomi suddenly turns around and tells her daughters-in-law to leave her, to return to their families and get remarried. And when you see the conversation here, you can see that they were very, very close. In verse 8, Naomi blesses them. She says, "May God deal kindly with you as you have dealt kindly with the dead." She's referring to her husband and two sons, and with me. The word kindly here literally means with love. So she's saying that Ruth and Orpah dealt with the dead and Naomi herself with love. And I want to focus on this word love. This Hebrew word is hesed, and I encourage you to remember this word. I would say that it's as important as the word agape in the New Testament. The number, and it means unchanging love. Unchanging love. So our Bible sometimes translates it as steadfast love. So steadfast, unchanging is the same. So unchanging, steadfast love. The number one characteristic of true love is loyalty. Loyalty. And the number one characteristic God requires from all of us, He requires many characteristics from us like kindness, patience, humility, and the like. But the number one out of them all is loyalty, based on love. He wants loyal people. And Naomi here is not simply saying that Ruth and Orpah were kind to her. She's saying that they stayed loyal and that they stuck by her through the worst of times, although things have been very, very difficult. So she's saying, my daughters, you've stayed loyal and stuck by my side through the worst of times. Thank you so much. Just don't know how to thank you enough. And God is going to bless you and give you good husbands. So leave me and return to your families and get remarried. You don't have to stay with me any longer. And she kisses them and they all weep loudly. So all the emotions, the agony and the pain they suppressed inside burst out. And they cry and cry. And Orpah and Ruth say that they will follow her back to Judah. But think about this. These women were foreigners, and Israelites despised foreigners. They treated them like dirt, less than animals. And plus, they were widows, and there was no guarantee that they could get remarried if they followed Naomi. I mean, humanly speaking, who would want to marry a foreign woman, a foreign widow with nothing? And Naomi didn't have any property or anything back in Judah. And Bethlehem. So their future was very unclear, with one exception. One thing was very clear. Once they got there, they had to beg for bread. That was very clear. So there was no hope and no expectations in following Naomi. But despite all of that, these two say that they will follow her. You can see that they were very close. So Naomi was at least blessed with two very good daughters-in-law. They were angels, two rays of sunlight in her otherwise very dark life. So I wish Naomi had said at this point, thank you, and cried once more and had taken them. But she again tries to persuade them to leave her. She says, my daughters, there's no hope in following me. I've no sons to give you as husbands. My life is painful enough that God has struck me. But looking at you suffering because of me really tears my heart. It's exceedingly bitter for me. So please, just leave me. And they weep again. It's really heartbreaking. In the past, whenever I read this passage, I got really mad at Naomi. I mean, of course, everything she says makes sense. It makes perfect sense. If Ruth or Orpah were your daughter, wouldn't you go there and force her to come back with you? Wouldn't you say, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? Why would you follow your dirt poor mother-in-law to a foreign country? Come back with me this instant. I don't know about you guys, but I would do that. So leaving Naomi made sense. It made perfect sense. But leaving her and returning to their family, own family meant, in the end, it meant leaving God. The Moabites didn't believe in God. So what Naomi is saying here is basically leave God and go to hell. That was it. Naomi was a believer, but she basically tried to persuade her daughters-in-law to leave God. So I condemned her furiously. But as I meditated on this passage, I came to understand a bit, to sympathize with her a little bit. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying what she did was okay. It wasn't okay. She was supposed to encourage her daughters-in-law. She was supposed to say something like, right now things are hard, but once we get to Judah, God will help us and restore our family again. So, although it's hard, let's trust in Him and have hope. And as Koreans say, fighting, or something like that. But the thing is, she was in too much pain. Her spirit was in a critical condition. And it's the same for us, isn't it? We're not always filled with the Holy Spirit. We're not always strong in faith. If one thing, we are very, very weak, very vulnerable. And no matter how much we grow spiritually, when things get hard, when it gets painful, we easily get dismayed and stumble and falter as well. Look at Naomi today. We don't know the level of her spiritual maturity or faith, but we do know that she lost her husband and then her 2 sons. And it felt like God was pouring out His wrath and His judgment on her. She was wrong, but that's what it felt like. And things seemed absolutely hopeless. No hope at all. Not even a speck. And all she felt were pain and resentment, bitterness toward God. And wouldn't you feel the same as well? Wouldn't you stumble as well? And as she looked at her 2 angelic, precious daughters-in-law, it became more bitter, more painful for her. I mean, I imagine her feeling very guilty. She probably felt that everything was her fault. She probably felt that they were going through agony because of her. And there was just nothing she could do for them. And that is why she said, she shouldn't have, but that's why she said, my daughters, I'm finished. God or not, whatever, just leave me. Save yourselves. And don't you think Orpah and Ruth knew Naomi's heart? Of course they did. That's why they cried again. So I'm not trying to say we can excuse Naomi. She did wrong, especially to Orpah. But I am trying to say Naomi was in excruciating pain and that we too can become like her in similar circumstances. Now let's look at verse 14. We see how Orpah and Ruth responded. After crying, Orpah kisses Naomi. So it was a kiss of goodbye. So she leaves her. But it says Ruth clung to Naomi. And Naomi for the 3rd time tries to persuade Ruth to leave. But she is adamant. She says that she will absolutely not leave her and even swears by God. And finally, Naomi says no more. I want to focus on Ruth's statement in verses 16 and 17. She says, do not urge me to leave you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May God do so to me and more, if anything but death parts me from you. So she's saying, I will never, ever leave you. What can we learn here? We can learn that love is essentially a choice. It's not an emotion. Of course, love has an emotional aspect to it. But emotion, no matter how strong it is, emotion without a choice is not love. Look at Orpah and Ruth. Both cried, both shed tears. And I think their tears were sincere from the bottom of their hearts. They both deeply cared for Naomi. Both had plenty of emotions for her. But their choices in the end differed. Ruth chose Naomi, while Orpah chose herself. Both loved Naomi to a degree, but Ruth loved her more than herself, while Orpah loved herself more. We humans naturally choose ourselves. We choose whatever gives us happiness and benefit. And why is that? It's because we love ourselves the most, right? We are the most precious beings to ourselves. And I think a good example is marriage. Why do you decide to marry that man or woman? It's because you think you're very wrong. It's a delusion, but you think you're absolutely sure that that person will make you happy. So you're really choosing not that person in a sense, but yourself. Because you love yourself more than anyone. Am I being too cynical here? But I really think it's true for many, many marriages. You're really getting married for yourself, not for that person. And my point is, we are all self-centered, very, very self-centered down to the core. So how do I know whether I love that person, whether I truly love that person? It's when I choose that person, even though choosing that person entails sacrifice and loss for me. If Naomi had a lot of money back in Bethlehem, and she had the good connections to introduce husbands to Ruth and Orpah, choosing her wouldn't be so hard, would it? Of course they should choose her. No brainer. But if that were the case, they would be choosing Naomi not because they loved her, but because they loved themselves. It would really be choosing themselves. But how was reality? choosing Naomi meant great sacrifice and loss of opportunity. Choosing her meant going to Israel, where no one knew them and where the future was unclear, with the only exception being it was 100% clear they had to beg for bread. And choosing her meant letting go of the opportunity to return home and get remarried relatively easily. But despite all of that, Ruth chose Naomi. Why is that? It's because she loved her. She really, really loved her. Jesus tells us to love one another. What does that mean? He's not saying have warm, fuzzy feelings for one another. He's saying choose your brothers and sisters over yourself. He's saying put them before yourself. He's saying give your life for them. So I'd like us to look over our relationships with our brothers and sisters in the Lord today. We can pray for them in tears. We can cry with them and laugh with them and sympathize with them. Just thinking about them can stir up our hearts, not out of anger and envy, but out of fondness and compassion. And we may really think, we may be absolutely sure that we really love them. But have we, like Ruth, chosen them over ourselves despite any sacrifice or loss? If there was no such choice, despite all the emotion, the chances are it's not true love. I pray and hope we can become like Ruth to one another, that we can put one another before ourselves. That is true love and the Father's will for us. And moreover, Ruth simply didn't choose Naomi only. She also chose God. In verse 16, she says, your God will become my God. And she chose God here. And she chose God although there was no benefit at all. In fact, choosing God meant sacrifice and loss for her for the same reasons. I think we think that we love God when the emotions inside of us get stirred up while we sing or pray. And we say, God, I love you. Jesus, I love you so much. You're the most precious person in my life. And really think that we love him. And yes, there is and should be an emotional aspect. But if we truly love God, we will choose him over ourselves despite any sacrifice or loss. I think there is a big problem for the Korean church and the Western church in general. It is that Christians are not required to really choose God. I mean, what do I mean? Why do we come to Christ? It's really for us, isn't it? It's for us to get saved, us to get eternal life, and more importantly, to get blessed in this life, especially with money. It's all about me. All about me. We say we love Jesus, but really we come to him because we love ourselves. Yes, we chose Jesus, but really we chose us. And choosing Jesus doesn't require that much sacrifice or loss if we compromise a bit with the world. And that is what many, if not most Christians do. They compromise and don't really choose God. But sooner or later, from time to time, if you're a child of God, God requires us to choose. He says to us, is it me or money? Is it me or your family? Is it me or your friends? Is it me or yourself? Choose, and choose only one. And whenever he asks us to make the choice, we stumble, we resent him, we shout at him, and many so easily leave him altogether after having said that they love Jesus. We say we love God, but if there's just a little bit of sacrifice required, we often don't choose him. And why is that? We can make up all kinds of excuses, but it's just that we don't love him that much. We love ourselves more. In contrast, Christians in the early church, and even now in persecuted countries, come to Christ fully knowing that there will be sacrifice and loss. They choose Christ even though choosing him means the distinct possibility of the loss of family and friends, reputation, property, and even life. They don't choose Christ for themselves. They choose him because they love him more than anything, even themselves, just like Ruth today. And that is true love. So I want to ask us this question today. Do we truly love Jesus? Are we willing to choose him over ourselves despite any sacrifice or loss? As I meditated on this passage, I realized that I was like Orpah many times, if not most times. I thought I chose God, but I really chose myself. Even deciding to become a pastor, although I said it was for the glory of God, was ultimately a choice for myself. And when God required me to choose him or my brothers or sisters over myself, I was often very, very reluctant to do so, and often refused to do so. But I've often thought that I really love God and my brothers because I felt like that. I really felt like I loved them, and because I shed some tears, just like Orpah. Like when you cry for someone, you really feel like you love them, right? But if no sacrifice is made, then what's the use? How about you guys? If there is no choice over yourself, that is not love. Well, not true love, anyways. So I pray that we'll choose God and brothers and sisters over ourselves. Now finally, I hope we can see Jesus through Ruth. Ruth here serves as a foreshadow of Jesus. I told you that the Bible talks about one person, and that is Jesus Christ, right? And here is a perfect example. As Ruth sacrificed many things to stay with Naomi, Jesus too sacrificed not just many things, but everything to stay with us. Naomi today was in utter hopelessness. Her heart was torn to shreds, and I imagine it being torn even more as she told her daughters-in-law to leave, and as she saw Orpah actually leaving. But Ruth stayed right by her, and I don't think Naomi would have made it without her. Likewise, we too often go through hard times. I don't know why, but life is hard, right? If you are in elementary school or middle school, I'll try to sugarcoat it, but you guys are old enough to know, or should know, that life is not easy. It's hard and painful. A little happiness, and then sadness and pain come break your heart. A little laughter, and then streams of tears cover your face and mess you up. And maybe you're in a lot of pain today, just like Naomi. Do you feel like there's no hope? Do you feel abandoned and all alone? If so, the Bible, God tells us today that like Ruth, Jesus is right by us and holding our hand at this moment. And to hold our hand, he laid down his life. He experienced hellfire, God's wrath, in our place. He went through all that sacrifice to choose us and be with us. And why is that? It's because he loves us. He really loves us. Way more than Ruth loved Naomi. I mean, Ruth loved Naomi a lot, but compared to Jesus' love for us, it's nothing. So you see, Jesus is the true Ruth. He's the better Ruth. Jesus is with us all the time, through times of joy and times of sorrow, and times of companionship when we're surrounded by people, and times of loneliness. So even if everyone else abandons us, Jesus will be with us until the end. Some of you may say inside, well, at least Naomi had Ruth. I got no one. I got no one in my life. Do you know how lonely I am? Do you know how painful I am? Well, if that's you, I'm going to say two things to you today. First, you be a Ruth before asking for a Ruth. Look to your left. Guys, look to your left. Right, back, and front. Be a Ruth to that person. Okay? Be loyal and faithful to them and stay by their side, even if everyone else abandons them. And second, even if there's no Ruth in our lives, even if you're truly all alone, it's okay because we have Jesus who is millions, billions of times better than any Ruth or any other companion. And if we truly love Jesus, if we truly cherish him above all else, isn't that enough? Having him, isn't that enough? Because our Ruth, Jesus, is with us, there's meaning and hope in this life, despite all the pain and suffering. And although we may get dismayed and falter like Ruth from time to time, it's okay because Jesus still holds on to us and will hold on to us and lead us back home. So don't be dismayed. Have hope. Turn your eyes to Jesus, who is holding your hand right now. I pray that the Holy Spirit will open our eyes to see Jesus with us today. Even when life gets hard and lonely, we can stand up again if we can see our Ruth, Jesus Christ. And like Jesus, I hope we'll be able to choose God and our brothers over ourselves, despite any sacrifice. So I encourage you to love, like really love and not pretend to love. Eventually, all that remain are God and brothers and sisters in the Lord. The rest will fade away very, very soon. And the Bible tells us to choose eternal, choose what will last, God and brethren. So let's look at our Ruth Jesus and become a Ruth to one another. You guys are already doing well in this area, and it's a blessing to have a caring community. But I encourage you to love more because you can never love enough. May God melt our self-centered hearts and lead us to love one another with a genuine love and give us the faith to look at Jesus this week. Let's pray.